see you, Stephen. And we now come to the motion on the draft Child Benefit and Guardians Allowance Uprating Order, which will be debated together with the motion on the draft Social Security Contributions, Rates, Limits and Thresholds Amendments, National Insurance Fund payments and extension of Veterans Relief regulations. I call the Minister to move the first motion. Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the Child Benefit and Guardians Allowance Uprating Order 2026 and the Social Security Contributions, Limits and Thresholds, National Insurance Fund payments and extension of Veterans Relief Regulations 2026 be approved. The former sets the rates for both Child Benefit and Guardians Allowance and will ensure these benefits, for which Treasury Ministers are responsible and HMRC delivers, are uprated by inflation in April 2026. The latter sets the rates of certain national insurance contributions classes and the level of certain thresholds for the 2026-27 tax year. The regulations also make provision for a Treasury grant to be paid into the National Insurance Fund, if required for the same tax year, through a transfer of wider government funds to the National Insurance Fund. And finally, these regulations also extend the Veterans Employer National Insurance Relief for 2 years until April 2028. Yes.
Now, Speaker, quick question to the Minister in relation to, and first of all, welcome what the Minister is saying. It's positive. It's a good step forward for guardians, for carers, for veterans. Sometimes I have people who come to me and ask me questions and say, "Can't get any help with this?" With the changes that come in and how it affects them, and when you give them more money, sometimes they fit into a tax bracket. So can I ask the Minister, is there help available for those who receive the increase in the guardians, the carers, the veterans, in relation to their monies, just to make sure that there's somebody there who can help them through the process? Sometimes it's a myriad or it's almost like walking through a muddy field. They just don't know where to go next.
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for his question, and he's right that there are a range of reliefs within the national insurance system that help particular groups, young people, people who've served in our military, and it's right that those are there, and I'm glad that the government took the decision to extend the relief by 2 years. The government does publish guidance on the way that these reliefs can be used. We aim to make sure that we can support the people who are seeking to employ the young people or people who've served in the military with that guidance, so that they are able to make those employment decisions, because we do want to support through the tax system the ability of particular groups to be able to be employed. And I thank him for his question. Turning to the detail of the Child Benefit and Guardians Allowance Uprating Order 2026, as honourable members will know, the government is committed to delivering a welfare system that's fair for taxpayers while providing support for those who need it. These regulations ensure the benefits for which Treasury Ministers are responsible and which HMRC delivers are uprated by inflation in April 26. Child Benefit and Guardians Allowance will increase by 3.8%, in line with the Consumer Price Index in the year to September 2025. Tax credits awards ended on the 5th of April 2025, and so no changes to rates will be required. Turning now to the second set of regulations before us today, as announced at budget, the primary threshold and the lower profits limit thresholds will be maintained at their current levels until April 2031. These regulations set the level for the 2026-27 tax year. For employees, entitlement towards contributory benefits, such as the state pension, is determined by their earnings being at or above the lower earnings limit. For self-employed people, their entitlement is determined by their earnings being at or above the small profits threshold. Madam Deputy Speaker, these regulations uprate the LEL and the SPT. This is the usual process and maintains the real level of income where someone gains entitlement to contributory benefits. The upper earnings limit for employee NICs and the upper profits limit for self-employed NICs, both the points at which the main rate falls to 2%, are aligned with the higher rate threshold for income tax. These thresholds will be maintained at their current levels, and these regulations set the level for the 2026-7 tax year. As announced at the budget last year, employer national insurance thresholds, including the secondary threshold, are also maintained at their current levels. And we've had a brief discussion already about the employer NICS reliefs, including employer NICS reliefs for under 21s, under 25 apprentices, veterans and new employees in free port and investment zones. The regulations we are debating today keep the thresholds for these reliefs at their current levels. The regulations also make provision for the NICS relief for employers of veterans to be extended for 2 years until April 2028, during which time the government will continue to consider the most effective way to support veterans into employment as part of the next spending review settlement. Madam Deputy Speaker, without these regulations, child benefit and guardian's allowance would fall in real terms, and HMRC would be unable to collect NICS receipts. So I hope that colleagues will join me in supporting them today.
The question is the motion on the draft child benefit and guardian's allowance operating order as on the order paper. I call Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a great pleasure to be here this afternoon to debate these two SIs with the Exchequer Secretary. And as the Minister stated, these regulations are made each year, and it is precedent for them to be debated on the floor of this House. And I'm glad to see that this precedent continues, and hope that the government will keep this going for the remainder of its premiership, however long that may last. So turning to the measures in front of us today, I want to make it clear that we will not be voting against them when the debate concludes. However, I'd just like to comment on each SI and the wider political discourse around them. The first set of regulations about social security set the rates of certain national insurance and contribution classes and the level of certain thresholds for the 2026-27 tax year. Specifically, it will uprate the lower earnings limit, the small profit threshold, and the rates of Class 2 and Class 3 national insurance contributions. And this will be increased by 3.8%, which is the Consumer Price Index figure from September 2025. All other limits and thresholds that these regulations cover will remain frozen at their current level. But what has been highlighted here by this is that the increase last year was 1.7% compared to 3.8% this year. Both of these percentages represent the rate of inflation that is being paid by that our constituents are suffering under. And of course, the 1.7% is what we left the government when they came to power. 3.8% is the level of inflation that the government is now delivering to consumers. As I say, when we left office, inflation was at 2%. We had managed to get this down following a once-in-a-generation pandemic and Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent energy crisis. So since Labour has come in, inflation has risen almost every month and is now stuck at around 3.6%. Why is that? Because they are relentlessly pursuing policies instead of making practical solutions. And for example, the drive towards net zero. Of course we want to have net zero. Of course we want to get to the point where we clean up our carbon footprints. But by going too far, this government has managed to put up energy bills by £300 since they were elected. Is it any wonder that inflation is so high and shows little sign of coming down anytime soon? So I don't want to press the Minister on too many questions, but could he, in due course, let us know when the government expects inflation to return to the target rate of 2%, which everybody agrees is where it should be. The other point I want to make is, about this particular SI is that it extends the employer national insurance contributions for veterans to 2028. And this means that businesses will continue to pay no employer NICS on salaries up to the veterans' upper secondary threshold of £50,000, £270 for the first year of their employment. A very good thing. I think the Minister will agree. We introduced this relief in 2022 as we wanted to encourage as many employers as possible to help our veterans. These people have done a huge amount to protect our country, and it is important that we show our gratitude to them. The Minister is nodding, and I'm sure he agrees with this point. Therefore, we welcome that the government have committed to extending this relief for the next 2 years. However, I do want to point out that in the budget document, the government did say the following, I quote, "The government will extend the employer NICS relief for employers hiring veterans in their first civilian role to April 2028, from which point support for veterans into employment will be covered through spending review settlements rather than through this tax relief." So I know that the government have committed to consult on which way would be best to do this. And this is positive, and I hope that the Minister is open to continue to consider continuing this relief as an option if a suitable alternative can't be found. And so in due course, it would be great if the Minister could, or the government could let us know kind of what is being planned and what time frame we will have in order to understand what will be happening for veterans. Turning to child benefit and guardian's allowance, This, like the previous one, this statutory instrument will uprate child benefit and guardians allowance in line with CPI for the 26-27 tax year. So again, these increases are something we welcome, as these particular benefits are an important part of our welfare system. For example, guardians allowance is designed to provide further support to people who care for someone else's child, for example, if the child's parents have died. To these people who step in, these people, the guardians, when they step in, are incredibly important to the upbringing of young children. We have a duty to support these people so that they can ensure the children they care for can have the best start in life. However, whilst these particular state benefits are important, I have to say the government is abandoning their responsibilities to tackle the wider benefits bill. This time last year in this debate, the former Exchequer Secretary, now the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, said, quote, "The government is committed to delivering a welfare system that is fair to taxpayers while providing support to those who need it." When it came down to it, though, this government didn't take the opportunity to make those savings. Instead, it appears, Madam Deputy Speaker, they caved into their backbenchers, and we are now in a position where the benefit bill continues to balloon. According to the Times, even the Prime Minister has vetoed plans to reform the welfare system, simply to avoid the embarrassment of yet another U-turn. And this simply isn't fair either to taxpayers, and it isn't fair to the people who need this support the most. So I hope the Minister, again, in due course, will set out when the needed benefits reforms will be brought forward and what steps he is taking to ensure taxpayers' money is going to those who need it most. Overall, though, Madam Deputy Speaker, we won't stand in the way of any of these SIs in front of us today. But as I say, in due course, we look forward to hearing what the Minister has to say, but not necessarily this afternoon, though, I would stress, on those points I have raised. Thank you.
I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Steve Darling.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I would like to welcome the proposals in respect of child benefit and guardianship allowance. I know when speaking to children of Torbay, when I visit schools, it's disturbing how many of them are only too alive to the cost of living crisis, worried about mum or dad not having enough money to put petrol in the car, concerned about covering the bills. So whilst these aren't big amounts of money, we know that it all adds up and is helpful to these youngsters in our communities. However, the national insurance elements of this are continuing the most significant misstep that the government undertook in this Parliament, and that is the hikes and effectively shooting the goose that lays the golden egg of economic growth. I know from my conversations with businesses across Torbay and across the west of England, whether it's Paynton Zoo, Woodlands or the water park Splashdown, the limiting of where you start to pay national insurance contributions to £5,000 is crippling for lots of these seasonal businesses. Because of the seasonality of this work, it then means that they're having to trim the opportunities for youngsters who be able to take on summer jobs. And I know from speaking to the owner of Splashdown only a couple of weeks ago, she talks about talking to people who came back in later years who were now solicitors, airline pilots or doctors, but they learnt the trade of getting into work on time but going and working on a water park and so forth. I'd then like to just reflect on particularly how it's hitting the hospitality industry across the west of England, the national insurance hikes that this draws out again. That the fact that we've already seen massive increases of cost of fuel for these businesses. And also what I hear from businesses is the uncertainty that they've got around the Employment Rights Bill. So I would call upon the Minister and the Government to make sure that they reflect on, as this is rolled out, limiting the impact and making sure that it is a soft introduction so it doesn't have a further devastating impact on our employment. But most of all, I would reflect on how the national insurance hike has impacted, and I would ask the Minister to reflect on that. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker.
The question is the motion on the draft Child Benefit and Guardians Allowance Operating Order as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.